Most people believe money disappears because of inflation. Prices rise, wages lag, end of story. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In 2026, a growing share of household money may disappear without prices changing at all. No crash. No headline. No warning. Just quiet rule changes that slowly drain what you keep, not what you earn. Legal tweaks, reporting requirements, and regulatory adjustments are reshaping how money moves. And most people won't notice until their finances feel tighter despite doing everything right. This isn't about fear or conspiracy. It's about awareness. These changes are rooted in legal updates, regulatory shifts, and economic research already underway. And the real cost isn't just money. It's time, attention, and daily decisions. The biggest impact won't appear on your payslip. It shows up in how your life quietly gets harder to manage. Number 1. Quiet tax shifts. Most people imagine tax changes as loud events. Big announcements, clear winners and losers, something you feel immediately in your pay. But the reality in 2026 is far subtler. Small adjustments to thresholds, allowances, and definitions can quietly change how much of your income you actually keep, even when your salary hasn't moved at all. A frozen threshold here, a tweaked allowance there, a reclassified benefit somewhere else. None of these feel dramatic on their own. Yet together, they steadily shrink real take-home income without ever triggering alarm bells. This is how money erosion now works. Silently, legally, and incrementally. For mid-career earners, this effect is especially pronounced. Many people between 35 and 65 are earning what looks like a good income on paper, yet feel financially stuck. The reason isn't always spending habits or lifestyle creep. It's that as earnings rise modestly over time, they quietly drift into less favorable tax territory while protections and allowances fail to rise at the same pace. What feels like progress ends up producing diminishing returns. You work more, earn slightly more, yet keep proportionally less, and often can't point to a single moment where things went wrong. The real danger lies in the cumulative impact. These changes don't take hundreds of pounds at once. They take small amounts repeatedly. Over a year, that might mean less flexibility, fewer buffers, and more reliance on careful planning just to stand still. Over several years, it becomes invisible financial erosion, not dramatic enough to spark outrage, but powerful enough to reshape long-term outcomes. People respond by cutting back quietly, delaying decisions, or absorbing the pressure mentally rather than financially. What makes this particularly draining is that it consumes attention as well as money. People spend more time checking figures, second-guessing decisions, and wondering why their finances feel tighter despite stability. This is not a system shock, it's friction. And friction, when sustained, is one of the most effective ways to reduce both financial confidence and forward momentum without ever announcing that anything has changed at all. Number 2. Compliance overload. One of the least discussed financial pressures in 2026 isn't a bill, a tax rate, or a deduction. It's the growing weight of compliance. New rules increasingly come packaged with extra forms, identity checks, digital reporting requirements, and verification steps that quietly expand the amount of admin expected from ordinary people. None of this looks dramatic. It arrives as emails, reminders, portals, updates, and simple confirmations that collectively demand more attention than most people realize. The cost isn't immediately visible in pounds and pence, but it shows up clearly in how much time and mental energy it consumes. This is why compliance should be understood as a time tax, not just paperwork. Every additional requirement pulls focus away from work, planning, rest, or family. For people already balancing full-time jobs, caregiving responsibilities, and long-term financial decisions, these small demands fragment attention. You're not just completing tasks, you're context switching, tracking deadlines, remembering passwords, and worrying about whether something was done correctly. Over time, this erodes productivity far more effectively than a single large obligation ever could. Legal complexity amplifies this effect. As systems become more detailed, the margin for error feels smaller, even when penalties are rare. People respond by double-checking, delaying decisions, or avoiding action altogether. This creates a drag on momentum. Projects take longer, financial decisions get postponed, and long-term planning is replaced with short-term compliance. The irony is that the rules are often designed for efficiency, yet the lived experience feels slower, heavier, and more mentally taxing. For adults in the 35 to 65 age group, this pressure hits a sensitive point. This is the stage of life where time is already scarce and cognitive load is high. Career responsibilities peak, family needs intensify, and future planning becomes unavoidable. Adding layers of administrative complexity doesn't just take minutes. It reshapes how days are structured. Even when no money is lost directly, something just as valuable is sustained focus. And when focus becomes fragmented, productivity quietly declines, leaving people feeling busy, organized, and compliant, yet strangely stuck. Number 3. Pension rule drift. When people think about pension risks, they usually imagine dramatic scenarios: market crashes, fund failures, or sudden policy announcements. But one of the most powerful forces affecting pensions in 2026 is far quieter: rule drift. Access ages, contribution flexibility, withdrawal conditions, and tax treatment don't tend to change overnight. They shift gradually, often through technical adjustments that feel minor in isolation but meaningful over time. The result isn't panic, it's uncertainty. And uncertainty is far more corrosive to long-term planning than outright bad news. What makes pension rule drift so damaging is the sense that the goalposts are always moving. You plan based on one set of assumptions, only to realize years later that the conditions have subtly changed. Maybe access is delayed slightly. Maybe flexibility is reduced. Maybe incentives are reshaped. None of these means pensions are failing, but they do undermine confidence. When people don't feel certain about the rules they're working toward, motivation weakens. Long-term planning starts to feel like guesswork rather than strategy. This uncertainty explains why so many people delay pension decisions even when they know they shouldn't. It's not ignorance, it's hesitation. People wait for clarity that never quite arrives, hoping rules will settle before they commit more time or money. But pensions reward early, consistent action. Delays don't just reduce returns, they compound stress. The longer decisions are postponed, the more mental space they occupy, and the harder they feel to revisit later. For mid-career adults, this creates a quiet tension. On paper, pensions are sorted, contributions are being made, statements arrive regularly, and balances grow slowly. Yet beneath that surface is doubt. Are the assumptions still valid? Will access look the same in 10 years? Will flexibility exist when it's needed most? That lingering uncertainty leads many to disengage emotionally, checking balances without adjusting strategy. Over time, this passive approach becomes costly, not because the system collapses, but because confidence erodes. And when confidence disappears, planning stalls, leaving people exposed not to sudden loss, but to slow regret that only becomes visible much later. Number 4. ISA fine print. ISAs are often treated as the simplest part of personal finance. A safe, familiar place where money can sit quietly and grow without drama. That sense of comfort is exactly why changes to ISA rules tend to go unnoticed. In 2026, most adjustments to savings vehicles aren't sweeping reforms. They're technical refinements. Contribution rules, eligibility definitions, transfer conditions, and usage limitations evolve slowly, often buried in guidance rather than headlines. On the surface, everything looks the same. In practice, the fine print can subtly alter how flexible, accessible, or efficient that safe money really is. The gap between understanding and reality is where problems emerge. Many savers assume that once money is placed into an ISA, the rules around it are fixed. They're not. While the core promise of tax efficiency remains, the surrounding conditions can shift. That might affect how and when funds can be moved, how allowances interact with other savings, or how easily money can be accessed without unintended consequences. These aren't traps, but they do require attention. And attention is precisely what many people don't give to areas of finance they believe are already settled. This misunderstanding often leads to poor decision-making, not because people are careless, but because they're operating on outdated assumptions. Someone might avoid reallocating funds because they fear losing allowances, or hesitate to use savings efficiently because the rules feel unclear. Others overcomplicate things, checking balances frequently without adjusting strategy, mistaking activity for control. The result is money that is technically safe, but strategically stagnant. For adults balancing work, family, and long-term planning, this creates a subtle burden. ISAs are meant to reduce friction, yet uncertainty around their details can increase it. Instead of offering peace of mind, they become another area that requires mental monitoring. Over time, confusion chips away at confidence. People delay decisions, miss opportunities, or default to inaction simply to avoid making a mistake. In that sense, the cost of fine print isn't measured in lost pounds alone. It's measured in hesitation, second-guessing, and the quiet erosion of trust in systems that were designed to feel simple in the first place. Number 5. Property cost creep. Property ownership is often framed as a stable milestone. Once you're on the ladder, the hardest part is done. But in 2026, ownership increasingly comes with a growing list of responsibilities that extend far beyond the mortgage. New standards, updated regulations, reporting requirements, and compliance expectations mean that owning a home now demands ongoing attention. These changes don't usually arrive as sudden shocks. They appear gradually, layered over time, turning property from a passive asset into something that quietly requires management. What's easy to miss is that many of the costs associated with property today come from standing still. Even without renovations, moves, or major upgrades, homeowners can face rising obligations simply to remain compliant. Rules evolve, expectations shift, and what was once acceptable becomes outdated. The expense isn't always immediate or dramatic, but it accumulates through maintenance decisions, paperwork, professional advice, and time spent understanding what's required. Doing nothing no longer means paying nothing. This creates a significant mental load. Homeowners are left tracking changes, worrying about whether their property still meets expectations, and mentally budgeting for future requirements that feel vague but unavoidable. It's not just financial pressure, it's cognitive pressure. Each new rule adds another item to an already crowded mental checklist, competing with work, family responsibilities, and long-term planning. Over time, this constant background vigilance erodes the sense of security that property is supposed to provide. Importantly, this isn't about panic selling or predicting collapse. Property remains central to financial stability for many people. The issue is awareness. When ownership is treated as set and forget, creeping obligations catch people off guard. Decisions get delayed, maintenance becomes reactive, and planning feels more stressful than it needs to be. People may feel anchored to an asset that demands more attention each year without offering clarity in return. For adults in midlife, this can quietly change the relationship with their home. Instead of being a foundation, it starts to feel like a responsibility that requires constant supervision. The real cost of property creep isn't just higher bills or added tasks. It's the gradual shift from confidence to caution, where staying informed becomes essential not because something is wrong, but because the rules around standing still keep changing. Number 6. Digital oversight. One of the most significant shifts affecting money in 2026 isn't a new tax or a new fee. It's the way financial activity is monitored. Increasingly, oversight is automated. Transactions are tracked digitally, records are matched across systems, and compliance checks happen in the background without human involvement. On the surface, this looks efficient and even helpful. Fewer forms, faster processing, cleaner records. But automation changes the balance between visibility and control in ways many people don't fully appreciate. Visibility means systems can see more quickly, and more consistently than ever before. Control, however, doesn't always move in the same direction. When oversight is automated, the burden subtly shifts to the individual to ensure everything is correct, up to date, and properly categorized. Small inconsistencies that once passed unnoticed can now trigger follow-ups, delays, or additional scrutiny. Nothing dramatic has gone wrong, yet time is suddenly spent responding, explaining, or correcting issues that arose simply because systems are now always watching. These systems strongly reward organization. Digitally tidy people, consistent records, timely updates, clear documentation, move through the process smoothly. Those who are busy, distracted, or slightly behind feel friction immediately. Neglect doesn't have to mean wrongdoing. It can mean missing an update, delaying a response, or misunderstanding a digital requirement. The result is a quiet penalty. More time spent fixing issues, more mental energy spent staying compliant, and more hesitation around financial decisions. What's rarely discussed is whether convenience is truly neutral. Automation removes some effort, but it also removes flexibility. Human discretion gives way to rules-based systems that don't account for context, workload, or life complexity. For adults balancing careers, families, and long-term planning, this can feel like another invisible pressure. You're not just managing money, you're managing how money appears to systems. Over time, this reshapes behavior. People become more cautious, more reactive, and more focused on avoiding mistakes than making progress. Digital oversight doesn't take money directly, but it changes how people interact with it. The cost shows up in attention, confidence, and the growing sense that staying financially clean requires constant background effort. And that raises a quiet but important question. When systems become more convenient for oversight, who is that convenience really for? Number 7. Time as currency. By 2026, one of the most important financial shifts isn't about money at all, it's about time. As legal and regulatory systems become more complex, the real cost shows up in attention and energy. Understanding rules, staying compliant, tracking changes, and making correct decisions now demand more planning time than ever before. This quietly turns time into a form of currency. The more time you have to spare, the easier it is to protect your finances. The less time you have, the more expensive everyday decisions become. Legal complexity doesn't just steal minutes, it fragments focus. Instead of thinking strategically about the future, people are pulled into constant maintenance mode, checking details, responding to updates, and managing uncertainty. Research on decision fatigue shows that the human brain has a limited capacity for complex choices. When that capacity is consumed by admin and rule interpretation, the quality of decisions declines. People default to safe options, delay action, or avoid decisions altogether. None of these feels dramatic, but over time, they shape financial outcomes in powerful ways. This is why time management has quietly become a financial skill. It's no longer enough to earn well or save consistently. You also need the mental space to engage with systems that demand ongoing attention. Those who can structure their time, reduce distractions, and limit unnecessary complexity gain an advantage. Those who can't often feel behind, not because they're careless, but because their attention is constantly being pulled in too many directions. For adults balancing careers, families, and future planning, this pressure is especially intense. Even when finances are stable, the sense of being mentally stretched creates stress. People feel busy but not productive, informed but not confident. Financial tasks bleed into evenings and weekends, crowding out rest and long-term thinking. Over time, this erodes motivation and clarity. The quiet shift is this: money problems increasingly begin as time problems. When attention is scarce, even good systems become hard to manage. And as rules grow more intricate, the ability to protect your finances depends less on what you know, and more on how much focus time you can realistically give to staying on top of it all. Number 8. The middle-class squeeze. The pressure felt by mid-income earners in 2026 isn't accidental or imagined. It sits at the intersection of rising responsibility and declining protection. As income increases beyond certain thresholds, support mechanisms gradually phase out, allowances shrink, eligibility disappears, and flexibility narrows. At the same time, expectations rise. More costs are absorbed privately, more risks are self-managed, and more planning is required to maintain stability. The result is a group that earns enough to be visible, but not enough to be insulated. This creates the familiar feeling of earning more but keeping less. Incomes rise modestly, often in line with experience and seniority, yet disposable income fails to follow. The explanation isn't a single policy or a sudden shift, it's an accumulation. Each phase-out, adjustment, or lost benefit feels logical in isolation. Together, they form a narrowing corridor where progress produces diminishing returns. Mid-income households end up carrying a growing share of system costs without the buffering enjoyed at either end of the income scale. Responsibilities also rise sharply in this band. Housing costs are higher, family obligations peak, and long-term planning becomes unavoidable. Education, care, property maintenance, and retirement all compete for attention and resources at the same time. Unlike lower earners, there is little targeted relief. Unlike higher earners, there is limited capacity to absorb shocks or outsource complexity. The system assumes resilience, but often without providing the tools to sustain it. What makes this squeeze particularly difficult is its subtlety. There is no clear moment where things break. Instead, people adjust quietly. They save a little less, delay decisions, reduce buffers, or absorb stress mentally rather than financially. From the outside, everything appears functional. From the inside, momentum slows. Planning becomes more cautious, risk-taking declines, and long-term confidence erodes. This isn't an emotional crisis, it's a structural one. The middle of the income distribution has become the balancing point for competing pressures, absorbing complexity while receiving fewer stabilizers. The outcome isn't collapse, but constraint. And over time, that constraint reshapes how people think about work, reward, and progress, reinforcing the sense that doing more doesn't always translate into getting ahead. Number 9. Planning paralysis. One of the most damaging side effects of constant legal and financial change isn't loss, it's hesitation. When rules shift frequently, even in small ways, people stop trusting long-term plans. In 2026, many adults aren't avoiding decisions because they don't care or don't understand the stakes. They're delaying because the future feels unstable. When today's rules may not apply tomorrow, committing to a long-term choice starts to feel risky, even when doing nothing carries its own cost. This uncertainty quietly discourages action. People postpone investing because they're unsure how future rules might affect access or returns. They delay upgrading homes because compliance requirements feel unclear. Others put off downsizing, career moves, or lifestyle changes because they fear locking themselves into decisions that could become inefficient later. None of this looks dramatic, but collectively it slows life momentum. Progress turns into maintenance, and planning becomes reactive rather than strategic. For those aged 35 to 65, this paralysis hits at a particularly sensitive stage. These are years when long-term decisions matter most: retirement planning, housing choices, career consolidation, and family support all converge. Yet this is also when risk tolerance naturally declines. Add shifting rules into the mix, and caution becomes the default. People wait for clarity that never fully arrives, telling themselves they'll decide next year or once things settle. Over time, those delays compound. The mental cost is significant. Unmade decisions don't disappear. They sit in the background, consuming attention. People feel busy researching, monitoring, and thinking, but not moving. This creates the illusion of productivity without progress. Energy that could be used to build something new is spent managing uncertainty instead. Planning paralysis isn't about laziness or fear. It's a rational response to an environment where the rules feel temporary. But the longer it persists, the more it shapes outcomes. Missed opportunities aren't always visible immediately, yet their absence is felt years later. Life doesn't stall overnight, it slows gradually, decision by decision, until momentum fades. And by the time clarity returns, the cost of waiting has already been quietly paid. Number 10. Staying ahead without obsession. In an environment where rules change, systems update, and responsibilities quietly expand, the natural response is hypervigilance. People start checking more often, reading more updates, and monitoring every small detail in an attempt to stay ahead. But by 2026, this approach often creates more strain than security. The goal isn't to track everything, it's to know what actually matters. Staying informed doesn't require constant monitoring. It requires selective awareness. A calm, grounded approach begins with understanding where attention has the highest return. Not every update deserves the same mental weight. Some changes are structural and long-term, shaping decisions over years. Others are technical and situational, relevant only when specific actions are taken. The problem arises when everything is treated as urgent. When attention is spread too thin, clarity disappears. People feel informed but overwhelmed, active but unfocused. What deserves attention are decisions with compounding impact, long-term commitments, access rules, and structural thresholds. What doesn't work are day-to-day fluctuations, speculative commentary, or constant headline-driven anxiety. The difference isn't knowledge, it's filtering. People who stay ahead aren't those who consume the most information, but those who know when to engage and when to ignore noise. Selective awareness also protects energy. Constant monitoring creates the illusion of control while quietly draining focus. Over time, this leads to fatigue and disengagement, the opposite of what was intended. A more sustainable approach accepts that uncertainty exists, but doesn't allow it to dominate daily thinking. Systems don't require constant supervision. They require periodic, intentional review. Emotionally, this shift is important. Many people feel they're falling behind simply because they can't keep up with everything. In reality, no one can. The pressure to stay constantly updated is a modern burden, not a necessity. Letting go of that expectation creates space for clearer thinking and better decisions. Staying ahead without obsession isn't passive, it's disciplined. It means choosing awareness over anxiety, focus over noise, and progress over perfection. And it sets the emotional tone for what comes next. Not fear of change, but confidence in navigating it with intention rather than exhaustion. Money isn't just what you earn, it's how much mental space it takes from your life, day after day, decision after decision. If there's one rule, change, or system that's been quietly confusing or draining you, share it in the comments. Real experiences matter more than opinions. If this helped you see things more clearly, watch our previous video on focus, productivity, and modern financial stress to connect the dots. We put serious time and research into every video here, so if you value this kind of calm, honest analysis, support the channel by subscribing. It's just one click.